Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Braver Angels Roundtable podcast, where we dare to talk politics across the red-blue divide and have fun doing it. I am your co-host, Mónica Guzmán, and today we're talking about an issue that's been an issue since well before I or anyone on today's roundtable was born. And it's an issue in part about being born, abortion. I am here with a special edition all-woman panel of Braver Angels leaders and friends who I'll introduce with today's check-in question. The Thanksgiving holiday is coming right up, a perfect time to consider having those tough political conversations with your uncle or in-laws using those finely honed Braver Angels skills. And it's also a great time to eat deliciously in large stomachache-inducing quantities. So in 10 seconds or less, what is your all-time favorite thing to eat at Thanksgiving? And we're going to start with Sage Snider, Director Emeritus of Cultural Engagement.
I make mashed potatoes on Thanksgiving, and it's the only time I cook all year, so I really enjoy them.
All right, mashed potatoes. Alma Cook, music co-chair for Braver Angels.
I see your mashed potatoes, Sage, and I raise you stuffing, the king of carbs.
You know, that's funny. April Cornfield, Director of Debates. Can you beat the king of carbs?
I feel like actually mashed potatoes have an enormous quantity of carbs, especially if you put like sour cream in them. And so I just have to agree. Mashed potatoes are actually my favorite food and have been my whole life. And yeah, it's just the right decision. That's what I have to say.
I love that you said that. For myself, Mónica Guzmán, Director of Digital and Storytelling, it's a mashed potatoes mashup because I was totally going to say mashed potatoes, except that you have to include the skin. That's where the nutrition comes in. That's what I was told by my mother.
Definitely about nutrition.
Very important.
It's very important. Otherwise, it is just carbs. You can't have that. Anyway. All right. Well, with that, we are ready to tackle what we're here to talk about today. And honestly, when we were thinking about tough topics to talk about on this roundtable, one of the toughest we could think of was what we're going to talk about now, which is abortion. The dilemmas it presents are so personal and yet so moral, so political and yet so private. Abortion as an issue, it doesn't show up for everyone equally. We have an all-woman panel today in part for that reason. But before we go on, I want to make one thing very clear to our listeners. We four women, two who lean red politically and two who lean blue, we're by no means representative of the vast range of views and experiences that frame abortion for everyone who feels touched by it, challenged by it, or mobilized to do something about it. We're here to have a conversation with each other. And while we'll aim to have that conversation respectfully and curiously, I'm sure we won't have it lightly. On January 22nd, 1973, the US Supreme Court's ruling in Roe versus Wade legalized abortion across our country. This month, the Supreme Court is hearing cases challenging a new law in Texas that bans most abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, and later, cases that challenge the whole future of Roe v. Wade. The passage of time doesn't seem to have brought us closer to consensus on an issue where everything from the value and definition of human life to people's ability to have agency over their bodies and their own stories hangs in a precarious balance. Here at Braver Angels, we have a way to invite both left and right to explore the general strengths and weaknesses of their side on the issues, and we use that term as a starting point at Braver Angels, not a constraint, without losing their minds. And it's called the fishbowl. April and Alma are here as our red panelists at the roundtable. Sage and I are blue. So April and Alma, you're first in the fishbowl. Sage and I are going to just listen as you answer two questions about how your side, the politically red side, tends to approach today's tough topic and how you come down on it. So tell us first, how would you describe the red side's take on abortion? And what do you find valuable in that take? Either of you can start.
Sure, I'll go first on this one, and then Alma, you can go first on the next one, maybe. Boy, I will be lucky if I get through this whole podcast without crying. This is such a personal issue for people, and there is so much pain on both sides. And I really mean that, on both sides. And so I think how I would describe my side's position is generally that life begins at conception, and that is when a human being begins. That's when there is the existence of a child, and that there's no, once there is a human being at stake, you have to protect them. You have to protect them. I would further say that I find it persuasive, although I don't know if I agree with this, but I find it persuasive when some of my conservative Christian friends tell me that, and pro-life activist friends tell me that they think that this is the slavery of our generation, that this is the big moral atrocity that we're living through. And so the other part of the question is, where do you come down? And I find this so hard. I am a sort of like unhappy pro-lifer. By that, I mean, I believe in the soul. I believe that God created each of us. And I don't know how you can believe in a soul and believe that it starts like, I don't know, at week 8 or week 15. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I believe that the soul begins at conception. But that makes me really sad because I know what that means for women in society. I'm a feminist too. And I know that what that means will come at a cost. But I don't know how to believe any other way on it.
So I resonate with aspects of that, April. But it's so weird because throughout my entire life, I've never been super emotional about this issue. Like, I know that there's pain on both sides of it, and the implications of this being life at conception are so profound, and the implications of the cost of that are profound and painful, but I've never actually been able to resonate with the pain or empathize with it. So I never have taken the time to develop a real opinion. But I do know, to dive a little bit more into the policy side of what you were getting at, I know that like the official Republican platform is opposition to public funds being used for something that is such a controversial issue. The general support for states' rights to ban it or regulate it as they want it. And there's also kind of this thing boiling under the surface where Republicans are quick to point out, hey, the US actually has some of the loosest abortion laws in the entire world. You know, if the four of us were in, literally just point at any country in Western Europe, Germany, Sweden, I don't know about Sweden actually, Spain, France, Portugal, Ireland, you're mostly going to find a gestational limit on abortion at 10 to 14 weeks, where in the US, it's more like 24 in the states that have a gestational limit at all. And Republicans as a whole, given what April said, want to walk that back to something like 20 just to get closer to that point of conception. At the same time, it's really interesting because in prepping for this call, I learned that by polling data, about a third of Republicans think that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. And that totally blew my mind. I was like, where are all these pro-choice Republicans? I literally couldn't name a pro-choice Republican friend of mine, but it does show that Reds are not a monolith on this. And as for where I come down, I mean, I like freedom. I don't like making laws. In fact, I don't even like making laws that tell states what kind of laws they can make. I like choice. But unless a woman was forced or deceived into sex, I believe she exercised her choice when she said yes to sex. Sex is the reproductive right. And if a man or a woman doesn't want to face the consequences of that right, they shouldn't be exercising it. So I've actually never had sex. To get personal, I believe sex belongs in marriage, and I've never been married. I turned 30 2 days ago, and at 30 years old, I've never had sex. That's an extremely unusual choice, but I think it's an extremely good one for 1,000 different reasons that I could get into. And it's interesting that for all the talk of choice in the abortion debate, the choice to exercise sexual discretion isn't really seen as valid or wise when I know firsthand that it is. So that's not really the policy side, but it's the cultural piece, and I care a lot about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to move to the second question for still our reds in the fishbowl. And that is, what are your reservations or concerns about how your own side tends to think about abortion?
Yeah, and I can go first on that one, as April suggested I could earlier. I think that in saying things like what I just said about personal choice, personal responsibility, there can be like a flippantness, similar to the flippantness that the right sometimes has when they talk about poverty. Like, oh, just make better choices. Just do the thing where you like finish high school. Just do the thing where you don't have a kid out of wedlock and get a job. And there's not enough sympathy for people who just grew up in different situations, really didn't have the same advantages. That's what I see. What about you, April?
Yeah, that's a really, I love this conversation already. And I really appreciate, Moni, that you decided to do an all women panel for this, because I think it's just different. So in terms of drawbacks, I mean, like I said, I identify as a feminist, and I know that being that, like, for a lot of history, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen was a real thing, because before contraception, or in cases where you're not allowed to use it, either you don't have sex, which for most people, almost kind of a saint over here. Like most people just like seem to utterly fail at that. And I could say one thing or another about that, but basically, women were having children all the time. And what that means is that you lose a lot of control over your life. And so, and then I also, the other major concern I have about this, so I'm pro-life, except in the cases of rape or life of the mother, but I also know that the courts don't actually protect people from rape. Like, you can't actually almost ever succeed at making an anti-rape claim. And that's if you're even willing to bring it. And women who are experiencing incest situations or other situations where their perpetrator has power over them, that's just not an option. And so the big fear I have, and the thing that keeps me from going to the March for Life and being really intense about this, honestly, is that I know that there are a lot of vulnerable women who are, as to your point, Alma, it's not the same to hold them accountable. And frankly, for victims or survivors of sexual violence, it's not, I mean, it's like apples and oranges. And so I think there are real drawbacks to this position too.
Well, thank you both. I think you've gotten us off to a very candid and wonderful start. So now it's our turn, the blues. So we're going to go into the fishbowl, me and Sage, and I will ask us the same question. So Sage, we'll start with you, I suppose. What do you see in our blue side's approach to abortion that you see as valuable?
First, Alma, I'm really impressed at your openness on this topic. I was really nervous about going into this because I don't feel comfortable talking about a lot of issues that relate to this topic. And, you know, it makes me, I think this is actually part of the core of this issue. I mean, Roe v. Wade was decided on the right to privacy, which is a little disturbing, but also a little real, because this is really private and it's really personal. And it is infuriating to me as a woman that I have to explain these things constantly to men who make these decisions, primarily, who just don't know anything about what this is like for women. And we have to share these really private things just to have basic human rights. This is Braver Angels, so I'm trying to be brave, but there's only so much I can do here, so I'm gonna do my best. I would say I'm the polar opposite of April on this topic. I think that absolutely a woman should have the right to have an abortion, and it is her decision, because she and her doctor are the only people who know what is the best choice for her, her body, her future, her family, her society. It's just such a complicated thing. It changes your whole life to have a child, even just to be pregnant, let alone even if you give it up for adoption. I mean, it's terrifying. I've certainly been terrified of getting pregnant my whole life, and I knew it would ruin everything I've ever worked for. So, you know, and I mean, I'm not even in a situation here where, like, I bet every one of us on this panel, if we really needed an abortion, we could get it if it really came down to that. And a lot of, and I think that's already not true for so many women. And I think for reasons that April articulated really well, you can't really differentiate between the women who it's life-threatening or rape or incest. Abortion has to be available easily to everyone for it to be available to women under those difficult circumstances. But I would say that I believe it should be available under, I mean, I don't think really anybody thinks that you should be able to have an abortion in the final trimester, like, unless there's a serious health reason for it. But I don't think you should have to justify it. I think that it's your choice.
So I have to talk about my mom, and I have to talk about my upbringing. So I was born in Mexico, raised Catholic, and very clear sense of morality around the sanctity of life all the way through high school. And I was sitting in Mr. McCafferty's ethics class one day, and he played for the class a movie called These Walls, If These Walls Could Talk, I think. And it's a movie about women who have had abortions. And it deeply moved me. And I remember it was the first time that I really thought, I don't know what people's lives are like. How can I tell people what they should do with their lives if I don't have that life? What if I didn't walk the path to that pain? Wait a second. My mother was a Spanish teacher in my high school, and soon after she started teaching there, started the Respect for Life Club, and began to take groups of students down to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. And she and I had a lot of hard conversations over the kitchen table, because while I agreed with her morally on so many things, I can't make myself think that abortion should be illegal. I can't get there. I do believe that abortion is very serious. And I think if I'll just say this out loud, I do believe that life begins at conception. But if I believe that life begins at conception is an abortion murder, and something inside me goes, well, hang on, wait, no, what the heck, that can't be. And then I'm stuck in this little pinball machine that goes back and forth. But that's where I'm at. And the valuable thing, the thing that I think that the blue side brings to this discussion is universality, a sense of we really can't know everyone's experience. And so let's try to build policies that are as compassionate and kind as can be. But I recognize, what about compassion for the baby/fetus? Okay, I'm going to throw the next question out to us blues, Sage. And so that is, what are your reservations or concerns about how your own side tends to think about abortion?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that it's very hard to argue and to defend our positions when you're arguing against people who believe that this is murder. I mean, there's just no strong argument against a belief that you're killing a life. I don't share that belief. To me, you know, it feels a little like imposing your religious beliefs on other people. But I respect the fact that other people see this as murder. I think that in our society, it's kind of hard to argue that a woman's life is worth more. Like the logistical consequences on a woman are complicated. They're not really respected in our society. It's hard to argue about like daycare and all of those issues. So, you know, you say murder and then you talk about logistics, like daycare and stuff. This is not an even balanced fight that we're having here. And it feels very hopeless. And I feel like it's hard to mobilize as well when you're not fighting against murder. Even though I think the stakes are really just as high for women, not just like that they might die during childbirth. I also think no one's for abortion. I mean, there really aren't people going out and getting abortion so that they can have free sex. It's just not a real thing. Abortion is a terrible thing to happen to a woman, and women take it very seriously when they have to have one. They're already very difficult to get. They're expensive, they're painful, they're emotionally awful. And I know it sticks with women for their whole lives, and they question their decisions. Yeah, it's not an easy decision, but there's just the morality of it on the blue side is complicated because no one's for abortion, but on the other side, it's very easy. You know, abortion's evil. So
I think that's going to stick in my head. Sage, thanks. Yeah, and I mean, for me, on reservations and concerns about how my own side thinks of abortion, I think because, and maybe I don't have to try to trace it back, but maybe because of my Catholic upbringing, maybe because of just a deep sense of respect for life that I have. I mean, you just named, Sage, frankly, something I needed to hear, you know, that it's not like women are getting abortions to have free sex. It's not like anyone's taking this lightly. Sometimes I think to many on the red side, it looks that way. The way that some on the blue side can talk about the issue. And I guess, you know, if I'm frank, sometimes it looks to me that way too. Like, for me, for example, right, like I can't, I have 2 children and I was going to have a third, and I had a miscarriage at 10 weeks. And I went into the hospital. I had a choice whether or not to let sort of everything move out naturally or go to the hospital where they do this procedure to take the baby out. And I learned at the hospital that the only difference between an abortion and the operation I had was whether the baby was alive. And even, you know, that miscarriage, I reflected on that in the hospital, right? That life is it's to me so unbelievably precious. But I don't know, but so is the ability to live our lives. That's precious too. Okay, I'll leave it there because I think we can go all kinds of directions with that. So that concludes the fishbowl segment of our conversation. And now we can all take a breath because it's time to get curious. So April and Alma, you're up. You have questions for Sage and myself, speaking that we can answer speaking from our own points of view. So April, let's start with you. What's your question for the blue side on abortion?
Well, it's funny because I really don't think we're that different in some ways, because I think there are people on the red side who don't understand the consequences for women and don't understand that society doesn't care and don't understand all the things. Anyway, but I really, my question, and it's a little hard to get out, even though it's kind of simple, and I'm particularly curious after what you've said, Moni, for your answer, but it's basically, Sage, you believe it's not a life. Moni, you believe that it is. My question, the way that I wrote it was, how sure are you that it's not a life? And how much are you willing to gamble on that? And that's I don't mean for that to be an aggressive question at all. I just, literally where I am coming from is that I don't know how to believe anything different, and that I'd rather be sure that that our society is not perpetuating murder of lots and lots and lots of children. I just would rather be sure of that, frankly. I mean, and to say the cold, blunt thing, than to make sure we protect women's rights. And that is a terrible choice to have to say. I hate that sentence. I hate it. And I would say that there's a lot, I'm sorry, I'm now pontificating, I'll stop in a second, but just that we should clearly do things to support moms and to support women and all of that. But yeah, that's my question, is like, how sure are you? And what are you willing to gamble on it? Like, are you comfortable with that?
Monica, why don't you go first?
So the question was, are you sure? I think.
Are you sure it's not a life? But in your case, it would be something more like, how do you live with the idea that it could be murder?
Yeah, that's it. I think that's the question for me. I live with the idea that it could be murder because it's clearly not. And I recognize that I already said that it could be murder. Now, let me explain myself. You know, the whole Schrodinger's cat thing? There's like,
No.
I shouldn't explain it because it'll, I think, take too long. But basically, I think that there are some things that both are what they are and are their opposite. And what gives meaning to them is all of us. And so part of the very circular answer I give myself is, if it were murder, it would be murder. If it were murder, we'd be putting people in jail. If it were murder, it would be murder. So it's not murder because it's not murder. I know I'm not making a lot of sense. I'm trying to get out something that feels very true in my brain, that maybe this gets to where we see morality originating. Sometimes I think morality originates in humans. You know, I am no longer a person of faith. When I thought morality originated in God. But anyway, I believe morality originates in humans, and I can see a future where maybe we believe it's murder and we treat it like murder. And I can also see a future where maybe we stop having this debate because it's just a bunch of cells. Frankly, that kind of scares me a bit. That's the best answer I can give you.
Thank you.
Sage.
I guess I have two answers. First, just from like a scientific orientation, I don't believe in a soul. So, you know, life, the creation process of life is very material and slow and complicated and gross and like physical and involves bodies. And it's like miscarriages are very common. You know, like this process is not like magic. There's a soul. This like two cells came together and now you're a human. Like that is physically not, it's not, women are part of this process. They're necessary to the embryo because it's not a human. It's just a part of the mother. It's literally like, it's using the mother's body to become a human. And it's not a human for, so I don't have any ethical qualms about that. You know, I think that for a lot of people who haven't experienced this and who don't have women's bodies, and even for women, because we don't really, you know, like we're not inside of her, like it's so easy to come up with a narrative and an idea that sounds very pretty and not confront the reality of what it means to create a life, which is just doesn't fit a picture like that and is complicated. And then the other side is just, you phrase this question as the uncertainty. How do you deal with that? To me, you have on one side of the scale, a bunch of cells with uncertainty and a real human being who is alive, who is part of our society, who is here now and has very concrete consequences. And that equation is very easy for me because I care about women and I know how hard life is for them, especially the women who are really facing the most difficult questions here. And I'm always going to side with them.
Thank you.
Thank you, April. Okay, Alma, what's your question for us blues?
I had a different question, and maybe I'll get a chance to air that later on in the discussion, but both you, Sage, and you, Monica, said that even pro-choice people take abortion very seriously. But what is the evidence of that when 1 in 4 women have had an abortion? I guess that's just not squaring. I mean, I look at that as a very high number. And again, I'm not emotional about this. I don't like digest this as a life in my like monkey brain. It is a cell, it's just a cluster of cells in my emotional mind. But I don't know. I feel like 1 in 4 women doing something means that it's a pretty flippant thing, like getting a tattoo, or you know what I'm saying? And I would love to know what you think it would mean for that to be taken seriously when you have people like Lena Dunham, and I'm not saying that she's by any means like the pro-choice spokesperson, but literally saying that she wishes that she had an abortion because it's such a normal and a positive thing that it's nothing. Why don't we all have it? I want to prove to you how normal and good it is by having one.
Sage, should I take this one, or do you want to start?
I can start. So I mean, Alma, I probably have some similar ideas to you about sex. I was very conservative about it, but I am married now, and I certainly take it very seriously. But I feel like the politics of sex and women's control over the conditions under which they have sex and whether or not they have sex, we are not a progressive society on these things. I mean, women are so powerless and dependent on men. And I mean, we literally don't have birth control for men. And the decision, I mean, you addressed this when you talked about the negatives with your side, but the decision to have sex does not feel like a decision for a lot of women a lot of the time. It's just not the way that our society is. And even if you are super careful and super protected, horrible things can happen. And I mean, if you have the statistics, 1 in 4 women will have an abortion. Okay, like that doesn't mean that they're having sex all the time and just getting abortions all the time. That means a woman is likely to face a serious crisis in their life, whether it be of timing or of health or the health of the child. Like there are just so many reasons why this can be necessary. I don't think it in any way suggests that women are having tons of sex and having tons of abortions. I don't think that's a reality. And until like you can really correlate sex with like the choice to expose yourself to this risk, I think you should take this option away from women.
And Alma, that's a really provocative question. I guess what I think of as my answer to that, you know, how is the left, or I suppose, you know, how are folks taking abortion seriously when there's this many abortions? I'm very fortunate, lucky, blessed, you know, put your adjective. I have everything I need in my life. I'm surrounded by love. I have an incredible family, a good group of friends. I have very little to worry about. And I think that I relate quite little through my personal experience to people who have a lot to worry about. And so my mind does not go to, gosh, if there's this many abortions, maybe there are this many people who just don't take it seriously. Instead, it goes more to, there are this many people who are this desperate. So
thank you.
Thank you, Alma, for that. So now we're going to switch to the blues asking questions of the red side. Sage, are you okay going first?
Sure. So April already mentioned this a little bit, but I wanted to hear more from both of you about what responsibility you think the state has to support kids whose mothers can't afford to raise them, and whether or not the fact that we don't have that structure right now should affect this debate in any way.
Sure. Well, since I started, I'll continue a little bit and then I'll pass over to you. Well, okay. I was about to say the state has a lot of responsibility, and then I was like, wait. I don't like it when the state does a lot of things. I think communities have a lot of responsibility, and that sometimes that is enacted through the state, and that sometimes it's enacted through institutions. I think that it is totally ridiculous that there's a claim that Blues often make about this, which is you care a lot about the child until it's born. And I think there's some merit there. So I really strongly support things like crisis pregnancy centers, not because their job is to convince women not to have abortions, but because their job is to help women be in a situation where they can actually make a choice that is a good choice, where the idea of having a child isn't just a terrible, like doesn't sort of doom them to some terrible future. And so I guess I would say the state versus community part gets me a little hung up because our community institutions are a lot weaker than they used to be. But the thing I really agree with in what you're asking, Sage, is that all the rest of us have a lot of responsibility to help put those women in positions where they can raise the children, to provide for the raising of children when the mother isn't in a good position to do it. I think that the fact that our society is really fixated on the nuclear family, where there's like 2 people who are supposed to be raising a kid, kids need more than 2 people. Like, kids are exhausting. I say watching and yes, hello, Moni. But I think and so I would support things like daycare, what is it called? Early childhood education centers, things like that. I think that there are a couple of interventions that I think are so important that I would support, I would support them happening through the state, even though I don't like having the state do things. So yeah, short version, all of us have a lot of responsibility there. I would like as many things as possible to be done through the community level. When they're not, I do want the state to do them in many cases.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, April. I'm a little bit more anarchist than you, so you're not going to hear me say that too many things. Yeah, you're not going to hear me say that too many things are the state's responsibility, and that would put me significantly more small government than even some of the policies that you named. And part of that is because I feel that the more control you cede to the state, the less control that communities will organically take over their loved ones. It's really interesting, and I don't know exactly why this story is coming to mind. Maybe I'll work it out as I'm sharing it. But in North Dakota, man, I've been working up there in the oil field for however long, half a decade more. And I've noticed for a really long time that there's so many out of wedlock births, like so many. I used to kind of joke about it. I was like, what's up with all these babies just everywhere? I feel like someone's getting pregnant every 2 seconds. And I would joke, or I kind of jokingly, but also seriously, like asking a friend of mine, do we not believe in birth control up here? Like, what's the deal? Like, we don't have that many Catholics, do we? This is crazy. And he turned to me and he's like, Alma, what we don't believe in is abortion. So North Dakota, and I could totally believe him. I mean, I haven't met a person up there that is like rah, yes, pro-choice. And so North Dakota is kind of this microcosm, I think, of what it would look like for a lot of these unplanned pregnancies to be carried to term. And what I see in North Dakota is not, this paradise of amazing, happy families where the community is just handling every single element of it. There's a lot of drug use. There's a ton of, even my story of how I became a business owner has to do with a really broken family. But I do know I would take 2 hands at least to count the number of people I know who are fostering, who are adopting, who are actively pushing to take care of the children or take care of the families that are having these unplanned pregnancies. And I don't know, it's not an answer. It's certainly not an easy answer, and certainly not overnight could you rip the state blanket off and be like, okay, just take care of yourselves now. But I would love and much prefer to see a world where we're taking care of one another.
Thank you. All right, well, I'll ask my question. And like April's earlier, I think it's going to take a bit to get out. I'm thinking about women, the biology of women, the unilateral burden we carry to reproduce the species. The way I wish we had a switch, like androids, like turn it off. I don't want to reproduce, boom, but we don't. the best we've got, I mean, the pill came along in what, the 60s? Revolution, right? I mean, there's a lot very compelling things that have been written about what that did to make women feel free to explore the kinds of things in life, pleasures, even risks, I suppose, but just to live life with the kind of abandon maybe that men could. So I'm thinking about, Alma, what you had said about that you know, that having sex is this choice and you've got to deal with the consequences. What about men's obligation in that?
You know, what's so interesting is that was actually my question for you guys initially before I changed gears. The thing that had brought it up for me is good old Dave Chappelle, who's now back in the news for another controversy, had a special years ago, and I didn't even hear the whole thing in full, but he had this bit about how, well, if women have the right to choose motherhood, choose to terminate motherhood, and all the responsibilities that come with that, should not fathers have the right to terminate the legal and financial responsibilities that come with being someone's biological father? Now, of course, we know that there are single moms who are not getting the child support that I literally have some friends who are these people who aren't getting the child support that they're entitled to under state law. But I think it's an extremely valid question. And when it comes to sexual choices, you will find no one who is harsher on men than I am. You will also find no one who is more enthusiastic about women asserting their sexual abstinence in the name of making men better people and forcing them to be more responsible and stop being, I was about to curse, stop being pigs. I'm disgusted by the male sexual ethic. And my own advocating of female abstinence is by no means an abdication of what I feel is men's responsibility in this area. And I don't know what the clear solution is, but I'm happy to keep yelling at them in the name of making them take more responsibility, because I do agree that they have some.
Wow. Well, wow. How do I follow that? Okay. I will say that if this conversation was intended to demonstrate that there are differences among reds and among blues, I think it could do that because I could not disagree more with the idea that men should be able to like cut off their contractual obligations. Sorry. I'm
not saying that they should. I'm not saying that they should. I just think it's a
yeah.
valid question. If one thing is allowed, why is not the other allowed
Sure.
in the discussion?
Yeah. I still object, but however, I defer to your points, to you having your perspective, and that is great. I think that, I mean, well, the first thing I wanted to say, Monica, is actually that I would amend slightly your comment about how free women felt, because I think that I studied anthropology and I can't ever quite let that go. Like, that lens is always here somewhere. And it just is the case that society has often controlled women in order to control reproduction. And I think that the liberation that women experienced, some of it is sexual, like in that they can engage sexually in a different way. But like, I think most of it is actually much more about society and men and structures not no longer trying to control reproduction by controlling women. And so I think the pill is or whatever, contraception is a godsend. I prefer IUDs myself. But I think it's a godsend, and that it makes possible a kind of society that actually dignifies who women are in the full breadth of their natures. Now, as for men, it's interesting that you asked this, because my husband, I almost said fiance. Anyway, my husband,
April just got married. I just want to
yeah, it's kind of a little more excusable than usual. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I love it. Anyway, he feels really strongly that he doesn't like how little voice men have in this, and he and I really disagree about this, because I think that like men have just as much responsibility and a lot less risk. And if there were a way, there's this whole, my mother says this thing sometimes, which she didn't make up, but just that if men could have babies, abortions would be available in the drive-through window at McDonald's. And like, that's a somewhat callous thing to say, but boy, the way that power works in our society, sometimes that seems like it would be true. Now, I still wouldn't support them, but I think that men have all the just as much responsibility as women, much less risk. I would actually argue that they perhaps have more responsibility, because in my like backwards way of thinking, I think they have some responsibility to support and take care of the woman while she's pregnant and like going through that major life event. And so, yeah, I think that they have just as much responsibility. And if we could find a way to make that what it meant to be manly, like to, and there are some corners of our society that do this, but like make that what it meant to be like a real man. I mean, that's a society that I would want to live in.
I totally agree. I love that risk and responsibility thing that you just outlined. And the drive-through quote reminded me of this tweet I saw, a year ago, 6 months ago, that was kind of tongue-in-cheek in a similar way. And it was, if female orgasms were necessary in order to reproduce, I reckon there'd be about 5 people walking this earth. And I was like, oh my God. It's so true. It's so true. Because I mean, there's so many women who are sexually active and who have never had an orgasm. And that freaking blows my mind. And what does that say about how the responsibility men feel to even take care of their woman from a pleasure standpoint, much less a like funding your child's upbringing standpoint?
Wow. Okay. I am bored with everything that came up during this conversation. We're going to move to takeaways. And so that is for about a minute, maybe up to a minute, each of us just reflects a bit on takeaways from this conversation. Whew. I don't want to start, so I'm going to make April start. Go, April.
Yes, ma'am. I am floored too, to be honest with you. Like I'm going to try to give you some concise takeaways, but like my takeaways are still going to be gestating, germinating for the rest of the weekend, maybe for like another week. Like this is really, I think one of my takeaways is that I love that this conversation can happen, and I would really like to be in more of them, because to be honest, I mostly talk about abortion with friends who have a real clear position, and on either side, but usually they're religious conservatives, and just because that's who brings it up. And this is so much more nuanced. And like, to be honest, I feel like I said this at the beginning, but I really feel like there's a lot of pain on both sides, because to the point about, on the one hand, you have this either murder or the specter of murder, suspicion, hints, like some part of us knows kind of feeling about it. Or on the other side, you have what I feel is a violation of women by the state, in that it's telling them what they can do in this incredibly personal. So like, I really have loved this conversation. That is I can give you some sort of technical takeaways, like, it's interesting, all these perspectives, like this surprised me. Sage, your perspective doesn't surprise me, but your demeanor about it and your attitude and your like, I don't usually like to talk about this, that whole thing, that's really interesting to me, because it's super different from my sort of stereotype of a like sex positive, like feminist who's like, it's my body, my whatever. Like it's a really different way of being about the whole thing. And so and then Mani, your ability to like both recognize the sanctity of life. I have to ask you more about that sometime soon. And Alma, it's like our little like Spartan goddess over here. Like, I just like, the choice gets made, you made your bed, you lie in it. And also society should support people, but F the state. We don't need none of that in here. So I love
put it on a billboard, baby.
That's right. We have common ground, but more we have a common struggle. I guess would be if I want to say something about common ground, that would be what it is. but mostly I loved this. And this feels nourishing to me around this topic in a way that I can't think of the last thing that I experienced that felt that way. So thank you.
In a twist, I'm going to call on myself because I realize I always call myself laugh, and that's weird. I have never in my life had such a valuable conversation about abortion. And I don't want my mother to take offense at that, because she and I have had some really cool conversations about abortion. But this one, yeah, there's a lot more to each of you on this than even we heard in the first couple minutes that you spoke. The depth of it, the care and the heart. It makes me really ache for how much the kind of sloganization of these issues makes everything feel so heartless. Why do we do that in our politics? Why do we allow ourselves to flatten things to the point that they're not really in touch with what it is to be human? I really ache for that tendency in our society. And I'm very motivated right now to like go out and change it. It's terrible. I'm also fascinated by the presence / non-presence of men in this conversation. So they're not present, but they were present because they are, I love what you said, April, men have just as much responsibility and much less risk. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw all of us nodding our head to that. So there was a certain, there's another divide in this, I guess is what I'm saying, that is worth tackling and wrestling with, because we are constrained by our biological reality on some of these things until, you know, the sci-fi scientists come over and create the artificial womb and all that, you know, we have the bodies we have and they do the things we do for our species to continue. So that's me. Alma.
It's hard to answer with one takeaway because I just do feel like I'm wallowing in the complexity of it, as I always do when I think about this topic, and it kind of makes me want to continue looking away and just not have an opinion, not have any kind of feeling. But I, you know, unsurprisingly, I've just continued to grow in respect for all of you guys. There's actually another podcast episode of a different show that I was reminded of during this wrap up. And if people want to continue hearing really thoughtful conversations on this, the Liturgist podcast, which is like, I don't want to say a Christian podcast, especially not anymore, but it's sort of faith adjacent, exploratory. And they have an episode with a woman named Rachel Held Evans, who I believe passed away a few years ago. But the episode is called Pro-Life, Pro-Choice, and then in parentheses, it says re-release. And that is honestly like one of the richest conversations I've ever heard on it. And this is easily the richest that I've ever been a part of. So thanks, guys.
All right, Sage, take us home on the takeaways.
Well, this conversation was a relief. This was actually my second Braver Angels conversation on this topic. I attended a pilot on this topic and it went very poorly. I remember being told by a man that it was my responsibility to die for the state if I got pregnant, just like it's a man's responsibility if they're drafted to die for the state. And all of the women were very upset. It was nice to have a conversation with just women who I found, and to plug here, the Braver Angels method. Like, I think that this is a topic that really needs personal conversations about the nuances and complexity of real people's experiences. And that's the only productive way to talk about this. And it's certainly easier to do that with women who have thought more carefully and been more affected by this issue. It's too bad that the conversation seems dominated by men who seem to talk a lot in abstractions and don't really think about what this means for people. And that's my liberal take on it. But I mean, conservative women can think about this better and can acknowledge complexity here. And it's nice to hear not just this spouting like right or wrong, this is the way that it is, and to talk about what this political debate really means for humans. And I encourage people listening to try to have these conversations with each other, because there's so much more we could say, I'm sure, if we were not recording right now, but like that's the stuff that really moves people. So be brave, have these conversations.
Hear, hear. Well, this conversation, like all conversations at Braver Angels, is never really over. So to keep it going as well, other than having your own conversations, please do let us know what you thought about this episode and what topics you'd like to see the Roundtable and the Braver Angels podcast hit next. Send an email to media@braverangels.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Alma for our checkout question.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Well, we're going to go out just the same way we came in with a question. This time, not about Thanksgiving dinner. This time, the question is, who is one woman, living or dead, real life or fictional, whom you deeply admire? April, let's go with you first. 30 seconds or less.
All right. Well, my easy answer is Elizabeth I, who I admire enormously. But to go with somebody living, I actually would say Beyonce. So spanning the whole spectrum here, just because she is such a rich phenomenon. Like she's not just music. She's not just sexuality. She's not just, I don't know. She is not easily capturable in any of our traditional categories. And it's powerful. So I really admire Beyonce.
Amen. You got a thumbs up from the music committee chair. Sage, what about you?
Okay, I'm gonna be a cliche here and say my mom. My mother, since her children have grown up and moved out of the house, has become a political powerhouse. She said she was not interested in politics at all and was never involved until we all grew up. And she has started a national movement called Start School Later, which has literally changed like millions of kids' lives, advocating for sleep. And I just think, to tie it in here, it's amazing what women can do when they have time to organize and be active in the public world and aren't constantly having to raise their kids. And I feel, I feel really guilty for that, but I'm astounded at what my mom and so many other women do with the second half of their lives when they're done raising children. Not that my mom's done at all.
Oh. Of course not. All right. Great answer. What about you, Moni?
You've heard how much I admire my mother. So she knows that. And I'm going to say that I'm also extremely lucky to have an incredible mother-in-law. And I just mean like, just above and beyond. She has a kind of core strength that I didn't think was possible in a person. And her ability to listen is out of this world, like to listen deeply. Sometimes I go to her and we start talking about something I'm kind of wrestling with, and I can feel something in my head going, she's going to see right through that. She's going to see right through that little thing that you're hiding from yourself. And she's going to point it out to you in the most incredible way that's going to change your life. and she will, with a smile on her face and a smile on mine. And it is amazing. She's an incredible leader, an incredible human being. I'm very lucky to have her in my life.
Oh, thanks, Moni. That's beautiful. I hope she's listening. As for me, I am going to close out with another musician who's not Beyonce, but is a powerhouse nonetheless, as a very complicated figure, and that would be Miss Lauryn Hill. I actually mentioned Lauryn Hill in an Artist of the Month interview for October. You can find that YouTube video. I think the YouTube video title is Conservative Rapper Just James Talks About blah, blah, blah. And that's in the Brave Angels feed. But Lauryn Hill is interesting. She actually has a song about getting pregnant without any planning and deciding to keep it, and what that inner monologue looked like. And that's not why she's a hero of mine, but she's just been such a prophetic figure almost to her generation. And my prayer is that she actually starts releasing music, because it's been like a decade since she put an album out. But that concludes another edition of the Braver Angels Roundtable, where we dare to talk about politics across the red-blue divide and have fun doing it, even when the subject is as heavy as this one was. So don't forget to hit subscribe on the podcast if you haven't already. We've got an amazing set of guests coming up, and we're always so excited that you're here. So on behalf of Moni, Sage, April, and myself, the Spartan goddess of the day, have a great day, everybody, and we will see you next time.